old-timer. Edward is one of the oldest engines working on the Fat Controller's railway. Even he can't get about like he used to. The other engines know he does his best to be a really useful engine and please the Fat Controller. But one day, the weather was unusually hot, and Edward didn't feel well. Steam leaked from his cylinder, and he found it hard to breathe. The trucks felt hot and bothered from the heat, and decided to take it out on poor Edward. As they started to climb Gordon's Hill, they began their tricks.
Hold back! Hold back!
The trucks giggled in their silly way.
No, you don't!
Gasped Edward breathlessly. His wheels spun furiously forward. But the heavy trucks pulled Edward back to the foot of the hill.
That's torn it, said the fireman glumly. All the effort we've put into holding those stupid trucks at bay has used all your water.
The guard went up the line to flag down any approaching trains. Luckily, Douglas wasn't far up the line. The guard told Douglas and his crew about Edward, and they were happy to help.
Dinner fast yourself, Edward,
whistled Douglas.
We'll get you to the next station.
And Douglas pushed Edward and the heavy trucks up the hill. And down the other side towards Marron Station. When they arrived, Douglas shunted Edward to the water column and took the train the rest of the way. As Edward was taking on water, Diesel boiled up beside him.
Poor old engine,
sneered Diesel.
You finally run out of puff. When the Fat Controller realizes this, he will cut you up for scrap and replace you with a modern and reliable engine like me.
Rubbish, hissed Edward.
I'm still a really useful engine and the Fat Controller knows that. Keep telling yourself that.
Sniggered Diesel, leaving Edward feeling more miserable than before. That night, the Fat Controller came to the sheds to speak to Edward.
I'm aware of the situations, but the men at the works are too busy, so until then you'll shunt in Wellsworth Yard.
Yes, sir, replied Edward. The next day, Edward went to work in Wellsworth Yard. He enjoyed shunting trucks around the yard.
I'd like some quiet work for a change,
he smiled. But just then,
Diesel rumbled in.
Hello, old-timer. The Fat Controller has sent me to lend you a helping buffer. It's obvious a tired old steamer like you can't do it alone.
And to prove this point, Diesel fiercely bumped a line of trucks. Edward sighed heavily and returned to his work. All day, Diesel treated the trucks roughly.
Those trucks will pay you back,
warned Edward.
Nonsense! You need to show them who's boss!
Later that day, the yard manager came to see Edward and Diesel.
Boko has been called away on an emergency task at the big station. I need you both to double head his heavy goods train to the harbour.
I could do it alone, sir. Edward can't in his current state,
said Diesel. The yard manager agreed, as Diesel buffered up to the train.
Now I'll show you how a modern up-to-date engine pulls tracks.
Edward said nothing. He just watched as Diesel strained out of the yard. Soon the yard manager returned.
Diesel has broken down on Gordon's Hill. Will you be able to push him to the next station?
I'll try, sir, said Edward, and with a cheerful whistle, he puffed out of the yard. Meanwhile, Diesel's driver was scolding him fiercely.
We wouldn't be in this mess if you weren't so keen to show off.
Just then, Edward buffered up to the brake van.
Beep beep! Are you ready?
Called Edward.
Yes, I am,
sulked Diesel. And with a great effort, Edward slowly pushed the heavy train up the hill. Soon they reached the top of the hill and coasted down the other side to Maron Station. Edward then shunted Diesel into a siding.
Well, Diesel, it looks like I'm not out of puff just yet.
Diesel said nothing. He just scowled. Weeks later, Edward had returned from the works and was back to work. As for Diesel, he would now think twice before dabbing Edward the Blue Engine again.